We all want our children to grow to be resilient, to be able to cope with whatever life throws at them. Today, I'm going to talk to you about resilience and how we, as parents and also as educators, can promote this important quality in children. Thanks everyone for coming. I'm Dr Kaylene Henderson. I'm a child psychiatrist, I'm a mother of 3, and I'm also the founder of A Dose of Awesomeness. And today we're going to be talking about resilience. So resilience is the ability to bounce back, keep going and adapt when life throws at you the tricky stuff, the tough times, the setbacks and the stress that inevitably come our way in life. Now, resilience isn't an innate trait. It's not a trait that children are born with. So as parents and educators, one of the important parts of our role is actually to build up this important quality in children. And there's quite a few ways we can do this, both through the experiences that we offer them and also through our interactions with them. Now, one of the really important ways we can build up resilience in children is by allowing them to experience both the ups and downs of life. We all want our children to have happy, magical childhoods, and that will mostly be the case. Childhood is a really fun, happy time, free from the stresses of grown-up land, but it shouldn't always be the case. It's really important that our children are exposed to manageable setbacks and disappointments, and that they're allowed the opportunities to face those setbacks and disappointments. Because when they have a chance to handle the little stuff, then we equip them to be more capable of handling the big stuff when they get bigger. And certainly that becomes increasingly important as they become teenagers and young adults, that they have had those experiences, that opportunities to practice coping with the tricky stuff in life that they'll inevitably face. It's important to distinguish between a couple of the different types of stress that our children face. So when we allow our children to face manageable setbacks and disappointments, tolerable stress, if you like, in the context of a supportive relationship, then this produces what we call positive stress responses in children. This is the stuff that really builds resilience in our kids. In contrast, some children are exposed to more prolonged or overwhelming or intense stress, which produces what we call toxic stress responses. So, for example, some children, as we know, are sadly exposed to abuse, neglect, family violence. This is really overwhelming, intense stress that isn't buffered by a supportive relationship. So it's sort of a double whammy for kids, if you like. So it's important to be able to distinguish between these different types of stress for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it really highlights for us that we shouldn't be protecting children from stress. Stress is actually really good for kids, but we need to make sure that the kind of stress that they're exposed to is a stress that helps and not harms them. The second way we can promote resilience in children is by allowing them opportunities to take non-dangerous risks. This is really important and an area that I think a lot of us as parents probably don't do enough of compared with our predecessors. Children need practice judging and taking risk. What we don't want is to protect children from these opportunities only to have them grow up to be teenagers who are having a crack at risk-taking for the first time when they're deciding whether or not to get into a drunk friend's car. We actually need to provide children with opportunities to judge which risk to take and which risk to leave well alone. So an example we often think about with children is tree climbing, and it's one that always comes to my mind since my children are avid tree climbers. The important thing is children are climbing trees taller than your head to try and keep your mouth shut when all you want to call out is be careful, be careful, be careful, because that doesn't help our kids. But instead, think about how you can scaffold the experience so that you're teaching them how to judge that risk. So teaching them that as they go higher than you can reach, as they go higher up the tree, to have a down plan. So for each branch they climb, think about how they're going to get down. Think about testing branches as they go. The key is really to teach them how to manage the experience rather than prevent them from having them, because children really do need experience judging and taking risks, just like they need to practice all sorts of things when they're young. It really equips them for adulthood and really does build resilience as they get older. One of the other really helpful ways to build resilience in our children is for parents and educators to help children just enough. And by that I mean just enough that they can actually do tasks by themselves. My dad always comes to mind when I think about this. When I was a child, he used to loosen the jam jar just enough that it was no longer impossible, but it was still pretty tricky to get open. And when you manage tricky tasks as a child, it not only extends your skill set, and builds upon your sense of mastery, but it really instills in you a sense that you are a competent and capable person when you can master tricky things. I often also think of one of my daughters who, when she was about 18 months, she was this gorgeous little blonde curly haired girl who was very into any opportunity to tackle something that she might have otherwise thought was too hard for her. And she couldn't yet say, yes, I did it by myself. But whenever she did tackle something that was a little too tricky for her and managed to succeed with that task, she would throw both her hands up in the air and declare, self! And I just remember being struck by how important those moments are for our children, those self moments. Each time we allow our children to have those self moments, we are really building their sense of competence and that they are a capable person and that they can handle the tricky stuff, which inevitably ties into resilience. Now, it's not just important to think about the physical tasks. We often think about helping our children just enough with tying their shoelaces or dressing themselves or managing tricky playground equipment, whatever it might be. But it's equally important to think about how it can help children just enough with difficult or challenging social situations. So when children come to you with a difficult social situation, it's equally important, to think about how you can help that child just enough to manage the situation themselves in those social situations. So when children come to you and they've been left out of a birthday party, or they're having trouble with a child who won't share, or whatever it might be, it's equally important to think, how can I help this child just enough to be able to manage this themselves? Providing that connection, that empathic understanding, that moment of I get it, that is really important for children and for your relationship. Allowing them to come up with opportunities or ideas for what they might be able to do in that situation, and then empowering them to choose which one they're going to go with. So you're really helping them just enough to learn problem-solving skills themselves, and that's really important. It's really important that our children do feel like independent, capable problem solvers. Some people think it's helpful to throw kids into the deep end, push them into situations in which they don't have the skills to manage, or to push children away when they're feeling upset and allow them to deal with their feelings on their own. And they mistakenly believe, albeit in a well-intentioned way, that this will build resilience in their children, but it's actually quite the opposite. Our children need to know that they're supported going into situations that they find challenging, and they equally need to know that we're their go-to person if they're having a tough time, if they're feeling upset and requiring comfort. It's certainly something that is really important for children to know as they get older and as they go further, that they can always come to us no matter what when life gets difficult. That does build resilience. That certainly builds independence when children know that they can go further because they've got us to turn to if things have got a little tricky. Now, this might be a different way of parenting than you've experienced. It often is for parents. And if that's the case, I'd certainly love to help you learn how to provide that sort of relationship for children. But it's incredibly important to always be your child's go-to person. And in fact, it's even better if children have more than one go-to person. It's really helpful if they are in an educational care environment, or if they are with extended family, that they equally feel supported by whoever they're with, that they know that whatever challenges they may face in that situation, that they can turn to whoever they're with and feel comforted if needed, to feel supported, and to be seen as being good and capable. All those qualities that we want to instill in our children and that we want them to see themselves as being. When we build this really healthy foundation for children by allowing them to take non-dangerous risks, by allowing them to experience both the ups and downs of life, by providing them with opportunities to have positive stress responses, by helping them just enough, and by always being their go-to person, providing comfort when they need, we really do provide a healthy foundation for children that will set them up to be better equipped to handle whatever life might throw at them down the track. That's how we build resilience. And when we do this for our children, you as parents and educators can stand back and say, self. The thing I've done with my kids too is just to let them know that you're going to keep coming back and checking on them. And the first few times you do this, you check on them at such a ridiculously frequent interval that you literally, you go out and you turn around, you come back in and say, see, this is me checking on you. I told you I'd check on you. Okay, let's do it again. You do your thing. I'll come back and check on you. And then you do the same thing. So crazy, really frequent.